So in all the presentations, we've seen a number of pillars of both urban education like project, but also of these issues of countercurrents of global urbanization. So we've seen different situations of precarity, of threat from various real estate schemes, and also the rather classic discussion of this contents with modernism and how can we activate that. But also we've seen ways of and a concept which wasn't been used, but what really emerged also ways of social mapping of actors, of how do we understand communities, their needs. How do, for instance, what Sheffield has done in collecting information about the particular civic initiatives is also from a social mapping in looking at Ljubljana, all the actors, and then looking at ways of reactivating spaces in Finland and in Chile. We also have seen so this discussion, the last paper on the Living Lab. I'm not going to discuss it further. I'm also here now and kind of to be a voice for the fourth pillar of this project, which is the Association for Urban Transition in Bucharest. So what I'll try to do is bring that different elements of that were discussed also in relation to the Bucharest work. As I cannot present twice in AG, I presented something yesterday, so it's disguised also as a discussion. So I will combine the discussion with a bit of just very brief understanding of the Bucharest context. Bucharest is in this system brings to a more, let's say, radical sense another societal issue, and that's how do we work in as urban professionals, as educators, in a society that's very low trust, way more than the other contexts. Low trust meaning low trust to institutions, perceived as generally corrupt and actually anti people's interest. On the other hand, low trust between people themselves after a dictatorial system which really, through secret policing and other forms, really kind of eroded all forms of working together. And actually, this is where I want to go back to Chile, because it's very interesting. And in my own research work, I looked at this entanglements between Latin America, particularly former dictatorships, Chile and Argentina, and Romania and former Yugoslavia. And in the case of Romania and Chile, you can see these discussions of how do you do urban projects in low trust. So for instance, in San Borja, I would just bring in the Ciudad Emergente initiative of Javier Vergara and his team, which is basically saying how do we bring people together, because after the Pinochet dictatorship, as we're doing also in Romania, can we talk about forms of post-dictatorial urbanism, not in the sense of dealing with memory, but in terms of dealing with civic initiatives. So what they do, for instance, also in places like San Borja, is this idea, El Gran Malón, bringing people together, sharing food. So this small forms of community engagement through events. But the question is, to what extent are these actually conducive to larger transformation? They're just mild catalysts, and this is what we also did in Bucharest. Just to introduce the association. As you can see, this is not a university. Why? Because as opposed to Sheffield, which has been dedicated to both the university historically and the department specifically to working with communities, in Bucharest, universities are still quite removed, and particularly the University of Architecture has still this modernist understanding of its role as kind of the makers of space, while the people's voices are not important because they're not experts, and it's quite dismissive, and there are many moments of being dismissive. So people from that university created actually this separate NGO, which is actually trying to communicate what planning is and trying to empower different communities. So this Association for Urban Transition, one of the victories of the project so far has been that the university has accepted to create in the future a unit which, on the model of Sheffield, actually will be a more interesting community work. But again, it's quite a political struggle because of the understanding of the city. So going back to the low trust society, as opposed to places that have already a lot of established associational structures. In Bucharest, you can map up to 10 civic initiatives groups. This is a very new thing for Romania. They started appearing. So when we are to work with communities, the first thing is that it's very hard to have counterparts in sense of community organizations. So we actually, in the work in Bucharest, we had two different strategies. One is to work with one of these new civic initiative groups that actually cohered and coalesced from the community itself, which is very spectacular again for the Romanian context. So we try to understand how they work, and see how can we help with having planners, geographers, architects, anthropologists, in helping with their own issues. And we worked in the last year to socially map the community to understand what is their main interest, and we're working into dealing with that, but also having noticed that there are problems how do we relate to the fact that also within this initiative group there are social values such as, for instance, Roma discrimination that we are critical of, and how do we work with partners that actually have let's say not an inclusive approach. So it's one of the challenges that we have. The second family of approaches deals with the majority of situations in Bucharest, in which you have private forms of dispossession, quite classic in not only in post-socialist Europe, but all over the place of dispossession and through various forms of privatization, and quite a lot of evictions in the case of Romania. But also public actors doing active demolitions in road projects. And various decisions that are quite arbitrary, quite anachronic, that are being still conducted in Bucharest. So our work has been in the last 2 years also to try to understand how can we build through a participatory action research, which I've done with students in urban anthropology in one of the universities in Bucharest. We try to understand the community and how can we actually contribute to creating a civic initiative group, even though the population there is very diverse, from quite affluent upper middle classes to quite deprived Roma. And so how do we bridge them where they don't want to be bridged in order to fight against a project that comes, funnily enough, from something that's supposed to be public interest, but the construction of a road which will evict a lot of people. So how do we did that also with a fellowship program, which is inspired by the Life Works project of Sheffield, in which we brought geographers, anthropologists, architects working together with the community in an experimental pedagogy way to understand both places. And also it brought in the teaching, for instance, in my own teaching in class, it brought this dilemma whether students who really want to take part into applied or engaged forms of anthropology or critical and participatory action research geography, whilst some of them are not comfortable. And of course, how do we deal with that? But I don't want to I don't want to take too much time from the discussion. I just wanted to bring some of the threads about different ways of challenges. Different ways of reacting to challenges, and going back to social mapping and to the experimental pedagogy. This is just a prompt and to the discussion. And the big question that we are now in the project is how do we actually understand and define indicators of change, and how do we evaluate that? So your thoughts are very welcome, and maybe we can have them over a coffee. So thank you. Yeah, so I tried at least to have to get closer to the.
So we go for a coffee and debate, or
yeah. So no, because this way we